You know, when you look at a stack of financial documents and you see a company pulling off like a 98% surge in earnings per share in a single year, your mind automatically goes to a very specific place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're immediately thinking Silicon Valley. You're
Right.
thinking it's a software startup or, maybe an AI disruptor, someone who just invented the next massive social algorithm or something.
Exactly. You picture ping pong tables in the break room, massive rounds of venture capital, and lines of code.
Yeah.
You definitely do not picture hard hats, miles of steel pipes, and massive industrial air conditioning units. But welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks. It's a wild one today.
It really is. We are looking at a stack of sources today, headlined by the incredibly dense 2025 annual report of Comfort Systems USA. And our mission for you listening is to figure out how a traditional blue-collar construction and contracting company put up growth numbers that look exactly like a tech unicorn.
It really is a mind-boggling scenario when you look at the raw data in these sources, because the central question is, how does a company that primarily installs commercial air conditioning, industrial plumbing, and electrical wiring double its net income? Like literally going from $522 million in 2024 to over $1.02 billion in 2025.
In a single 12-month window.
All right, in just 1 year.
I mean, that is the billion-dollar question.
Mhm.
And to get there, we can't just skip to the end of the report. We really need to look under the hood.
Right.
What exact physical products are they selling? How is their business model actually structured to survive in, construction? Because that's a tough industry. Who is writing these massive checks? And what were the specific catalysts that caused their profits to just absolutely explode between 2024 and 2025?
Yeah, we have to build the whole picture.
So let's start with the foundation. What is Comfort Systems actually doing on the ground?
Well, their operations are split into two main segments. The lion's share is the mechanical segment, which generated 73.3% of their 2025 revenue. And when the industry says mechanical, they are talking about heavy-duty heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. HVAC.
Right, but not like the unit sitting in my backyard.
Oh, no. It's far beyond the AC unit outside your house. We are talking about like industrial plumbing, complex piping arrays, temperature controls, and massive fire protection systems.
So it's really the heavy physical infrastructure of a commercial space.
Exactly. And then the second segment is electrical, which makes up the remaining 26.7% of their revenue.
Got it.
And this is the installation and ongoing servicing of massive electrical systems, heavy-duty switchgear, and industrial power generators.
I actually find it helpful to look at a commercial building as a living organism.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the steel girders and the concrete foundation, that's just the skeleton. It just sits there.
Okay.
But what Comfort Systems is doing, the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, that is the respiratory and nervous systems of the building.
That is exactly what it is, yeah.
Because without those systems, a massive facility is just a hollow shell. They are the ones making it breathe, making the power flow, bringing the entire structure to life.
That's a great way to visualize it. And understanding who they are bringing these buildings to life for tells you everything about their growth. Because if you are a homeowner whose AC unit just broke in the middle of July, you are not calling Comfort Systems.
Right, they don't do houses.
Barely any. It's only 1.4% of their portfolio is multifamily or residential.
Wow.
Yeah. They cater almost entirely to commercial, industrial, and institutional customers.
And here's where the data gets incredibly revealing, I think. When you look at their customer base for 2025, there is this massive defining skew. So healthcare makes up 8.9%. Education is 7.3%. Manufacturing is a really solid 22.1%. But a staggering 45% of their entire revenue comes from the technology sector.
It's huge.
Nearly half.
Yes. And we really have to pause here because this completely reframes how we talk about tech. Well, people tend to think of the tech sector as cloud computing, artificial intelligence, generative software, things that feel invisible, right?
Right, it's all in the ether.
But the cloud isn't actually in the sky. The cloud lives in millions of square feet of massive physical data centers And the generative AI boom we're seeing right now doesn't just need more servers, it needs exponentially denser computing power.
Because those chips run so hot.
Exactly. Those advanced AI chips run incredibly hot, so they require thousands of miles of complex wiring, colossal electrical substations, and unbelievable amounts of specialized liquid and HVAC cooling so the servers don't literally melt down.
Wow, so the digital world is like completely dependent on a massive physical life support system.
Completely.
And Comfort Systems is building that life support.
But wait, reading through the sources, there is a stat here about their customer concentration that really stopped me in my tracks.
The big one.
Yeah, one single customer, just one unidentified company, represented 12.8% of their entire 2025 consolidated revenue, out of $9.1 billion in total revenue.
Yeah. That means one tech giant paid them over $1 billion.
It is an astonishing concentration of capital, for sure.
But isn't that deeply terrifying from a business perspective? I mean, having a client throwing $1 billion at you is great for the top line today.
Sure.
But if one single tech CEO decides, you know what, we overbuilt, we're cutting our capital expenditure next year, thousands of blue-collar plumbers and electricians could suddenly be staring at an empty pipeline. That is a glaring vulnerability.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's an incredibly high-stakes relationship. You are essentially hitching your wagon to a singular corporate budget.
Right.
If that tech giant sneezes, Comfort Systems catches a cold. But to understand why they are willing to take that risk and how they manage the chaos of large-scale construction, we have to look at their actual business model.
Because construction is notoriously risky, even without giant client concentration.
Exactly. It's a tough racket. So let's break down how the money flows. About 36.8% of their revenue is recurring work on existing buildings, renovation, maintenance, repair.
Okay, so that's the stable stuff.
Right, that's stable. But the vast majority, 63.2%, is brand new construction and installation. And practically all of their work, 92.7%, is project-based.
And within that new construction bucket, the annual report highlights two distinctly different approaches, right?
Yeah.
Design and build versus plan and spec.
Yes.
What is the actual difference when you're out on the job site?
Well, it really comes down to control and timeline. In a design and build project, Comfort Systems is brought to the table on day one.
Okay.
They collaborate directly with the building owner to engineer a custom energy-efficient system from scratch. They do the consulting, the engineering, and the physical installation. It's a real partnership.
Got it.
Now contrast that with plan and spec. In that scenario, a third-party architect has already finished the blueprints. The system is fully designed. Comfort Systems is simply handed the paperwork and told to bid against like 3 other contractors on who can provide the labor and materials the cheapest.
Okay, I think I get it. Let's think of this like the culinary world.
Oh, I love a food analogy.
Right. So design and build is a restaurant owner hiring a master chef to come into an empty space, look at the local ingredient supply, and design a custom menu from scratch that perfectly fits the kitchen's capabilities.
Exactly.
It's highly efficient, and you build a long-term relationship. But plan and spec is like someone handing a chef a strict, incredibly complex recipe and saying, okay, you and 5 other chefs blindly bid on who can cook this the cheapest. It's purely transactional.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy, and as the report explicitly notes, those plan and spec projects usually take much longer, they are significantly less efficient, and they suffer from constant schedule changes.
Why is that?
Because the people who drew the blueprints aren't the ones actually trying to fit the physical pipes behind the drywall,
Oh, right.
Design and build allows Comfort Systems to use their specialized engineering expertise to eliminate waste before a single pipe is even cut.
I see the advantage there, but I really need to push back on something fundamental here.
Sure, go for it.
The vast majority of their work is project-based, and a lot of these are fixed-price contracts. Now, we are living in an era of unpredictable supply chains and massive inflation. If Comfort Systems signs a $50 million fixed-price contract to build a cooling system, and then 3 months later the global price of copper wire doubles or highly skilled labor gets way more expensive, Comfort Systems eats that cost overrun, right?
Yes, they do.
I mean, isn't relying on fixed-price project work essentially a high-stakes gamble against macroeconomic forces?
You've just identified the central risk of their entire industry. Yes, if raw material costs spiral out of control, they eat the loss. The contract price is locked in.
That's terrifying.
It is. So the question is, how do they survive, let alone thrive and double their profit under that kind of pressure?
Right, how?
The answer lies in how they physically mitigate that risk through something they call modular construction.
Modular construction, meaning like they are building the pieces before they get to the site.
More than just pieces. Imagine a multi-ton cooling plant. Instead of shipping thousands of raw components to a dusty, chaotic construction site where, weather can cause days of delays and labor is really hard to coordinate, they are building these massive, complex plants and piping networks completely off-site.
Wait, really? Where do they build them?
They construct them in massive, climate-controlled indoor manufacturing facilities that they own. They assemble the entire module there, test the pressure and electrical routing for quality control, load this massive unit onto a flatbed truck, and then literally crane it into the data center to just be bolted into place.
Oh, wow. Okay, that fundamentally changes the equation.
It changes everything.
Because you remove the weather risk entirely. You remove the job site coordination delays, and your workers are in a safe, controlled factory setting operating at maximum efficiency, rather than trying to, weld a pipe while balancing on a beam in the rain.
Precisely. And it answers your question about inflation and supply chains, too.
How so?
Because they operate through 50 decentralized but connected operating units across the country, they can pool their resources. They can buy copper and steel in massive, predictable bulk orders well in advance, store it at their factories, and build these modules efficiently.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. This shared network allows them to control their costs with ruthless precision. It basically insulates them from the macroeconomic chaos that crushes smaller, traditional contractors.
So they've effectively insulated themselves against weather, labor shortages, and supply chain shocks with these off-site factories.
Exactly.
But wait, they've been utilizing modular construction for years, right? They've had these operating units. What on earth happened between 2024 and 2025 to make their profits suddenly go parabolic?
Okay, so the numbers from 2025 are nothing short of spectacular.
Hit me.
Revenue hit $9.1 billion. That is a 30% increase from $7.02 billion in 2024. Net income, so the actual cash profit they take home, essentially doubled, going from $522 million to $1.02 billion. And their backlog, which is the pipeline of signed contracts for future work, surged from roughly $6 billion to an astonishing $11.94 billion.
I mean, just to double your backlog to almost $12 billion in 1 year is insane for a physical construction company.
It really is.
Honestly, my first thought when I see a 30% revenue jump for an established company is, okay, they didn't do that organically. They must have just acquired a bunch of regional competitors to inflate their top line.
That's the logical assumption. But what's fascinating here is that it's entirely wrong.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they did make acquisitions. The sources mentioned they bought several companies across 2024 and 2025, including Fine Zylstra, Meisner, Rightway, Century, Summit, and J&S.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of buying.
It does, but those acquisitions only accounted for a tiny 3.4% increase in revenue.
Wait, are you kidding? Only 3.4% from buying other companies.
Right. The real engine of this story was same-store activity. That means their existing, already established operations grew organically by a massive 26.1%.
That's incredible.
It wasn't financial engineering or buying market share. It was just an absolute explosion of pure demand and flawless execution.
And the sources highlight some specific regional hubs driving this that are just, well, mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah. The Texas numbers.
Yeah. The Texas electrical operation alone saw a $649.3 million revenue bump. Just that one unit.
Insane.
And it brought in a $161.5 million gross profit bump. Then the Texas modular operation saw a $124.3 million profit increase. And then one single operation in North Carolina added $267.5 million in revenue. It's like very specific pockets of the country are just on fire.
And if you look at a map, those pockets perfectly overlap with where the generative AI and advanced manufacturing boom is taking place.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Texas and North Carolina have become massive critical hubs for hyperscale data centers and semiconductor manufacturing facilities. But to really understand the magic trick here, how a 30% revenue increase translated into a 100% net profit increase, we have to look at the financials. We have to look at margin leverage.
Let's get into this because the math feels like it shouldn't work.
Okay, so their gross profit margin jumped from 21.0% in 2024 to 24.1% in 2025.
Okay.
They attribute this to better execution, specifically maxing out the efficiency of those modular construction factories we discussed, and generally just higher volume.
Makes sense.
At the same time, they're selling general and administrative expenses, or SG&A, which is essentially corporate overhead, actually actually decreased as a percentage of revenue, dropping from 10.4% down to 9.7%.
Okay, hold on. Help me out with the math here.
Sure.
Their gross margin went from 21% to 24.1%. To an outsider, squeezing out 3 extra pennies on the dollar sounds like a rounding error. You hear that and think, good for you, you found 3 cents.
Right, it sounds tiny.
How does a 3% margin bump result in a 100% profit explosion?
This is the concept of operating leverage, and it is the absolute key to understanding how a heavy industrial business scales.
Yeah.
Let's step away from construction for a second. Imagine you own a massive industrial equipment rental company. You have a huge storage yard, you pay heavy insurance premiums, and you pay salaries for a team of executive managers.
Got my yard, got my managers.
Right. Those are your fixed costs, your SG&A overhead. Whether you rent out 10 heavy cranes or 100 cranes, those costs basically stay the exact same.
Right. The landlord doesn't care how many cranes I rent out. The yard lease is the yard lease.
Exactly. Now, in 2024, Comfort Systems was keeping 21 cents of gross profit for every dollar of revenue to cover that fixed corporate overhead and deliver a profit to shareholders. But in 2025, they got a massive surge in AI data center orders. They are renting out way more cranes, so to speak. But because they've perfected this modular factory system, they also got slightly more efficient at building them. So now they keep 24.1 cents on every dollar.
And here is the kicker, I'm guessing. Because they already paid for the factory's lease and the HR department and the executive salaries.
Almost all of that extra 3.1 cents on the massive new volume of sales drops straight to the bottom line as pure profit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When your revenue jumps by more than $2 billion and you've suddenly improved your margin by over 3% across that entire $9 billion base while keeping your corporate headquarters costs completely flat, the math creates an exponential multiplier effect.
That's amazing.
That is operating leverage in action. You are scaling revenue incredibly efficiently without bloating your corporate structure. That is exactly how a 30% revenue increase translates into a 98% surge in earnings per share.
That makes perfect sense now. The 3 pennies isn't just 3 pennies. It's 3 pennies multiplied by billions of dollars, with no new headquarters to build and no new executives to hire.
Exactly.
It creates an absolute avalanche of cash. They used incredible internal efficiency to overcome all the inflation and supply chain shortages that are currently crushing their smaller competitors.
Precisely. They took a chaotic, highly inflationary macroeconomic environment, and they used scale, offsite modular innovation, and operating leverage to turn it into an unprecedented competitive advantage.
So bringing this all together, what we've seen today in this deep dive is a traditional blue-collar mechanical, electrical, and plumbing business that essentially caught a historic tailwind. They rode the unprecedented physical demand for high-tech data centers and advanced manufacturing. By utilizing a really smart factory-based modular construction model and achieving that incredible operating leverage, they successfully doubled their net income and their backlog in a single year.
They absolutely did.
Yeah. They beat inflation, they neutralized the supply chain crunch, and they operated a business of steel pipes and air conditioners, like a tech growth stock.
And if we connect this back to you, the listener, and your daily life, why does an MEP contractor's annual report matter?
Right. Why should anyone care?
Because we hear constantly about the AI revolution and the tech boom. We talk about it as if it's ethereal. We use words like the cloud, as if it's just software code magically floating in the ether.
But the internet is heavy. Every time you type a prompt into an AI, it requires physical water, physical power, and physical cooling.
Exactly. The digital world is anchored to the ground. It requires thousands of craft professionals, miles of industrial piping, and massive roaring cooling towers just to exist.
Yeah.
Every time you use a generative AI tool, stream a 4K video, or save a massive file to the cloud, you are intimately relying on the invisible physical infrastructure that companies like Comfort Systems build. They are the physical backbone behind our entire digital reality.
And I think that leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative thought for you to ponder.
Let's hear it.
If 45% of this company's entire $9 billion revenue is now tied directly to the technology sector, and a single tech client represents almost 13% of their entire business, are they even a traditional construction company anymore?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
Or have they effectively mutated into a highly dependent proxy for the tech industry's massive capital expenditure?
Right now, they're successfully building the respiratory system for the digital age.
Right. But what happens to the builders of the respiratory system if the great tech building boom suddenly catches a cold? It's easy to look at a 98% earnings surge and a $12 billion backlog and think they have Silicon Valley invincibility.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, a data center is still a physical building, and economic gravity eventually applies to everything. Keep that in mind the next time you save something to the cloud. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.